लाइफ में लेना देना तो चलता रहता है। इधर फ्लेक्सी लोन से बोरो कर लिया और उधर बाय मॉम डैड का वेकेशन डन। शादी का डिसीजन लिया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से और बोरो किया। प्रमोशन मिला तो ये लो थोड़ा लोन वापस कर दिया, थैंक यू। नए इंटीरियर्स का डील किया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से फिर थोड़ा ले लिया। ईयर एंड बोनस मिला तो इस बार लोन ज्यादा वापस कर दिया। लाइफ में लेना देना चलता रहेगा तो लोन्स में क्यों नहीं। इसीलिए फ्लेक्सी लोन फ्रॉम बजाज फिनसर्व एक ऐसा लोन जो जब चाहे बोरो करे, जैसे चाहे रीपे करे, वो भी चुटकी में। थिंक इट डन विद बजाज फिनसर्व।
हेलो, हर सीजन के लिए नए इंटीरियर्स?
हाँ, वो भी हर रूम के लिए।
फ्रिज, स्मार्टफोन या बड़ा टीवी?
तीनों क्यों नहीं?
अरे ये तो शॉपिंग लिस्ट में नहीं था।
सो अब शॉपिंग कार्ट में तो है। सॉरी।
अच्छा, नए आउटफिट्स की विश लिस्ट।
विश क्यों? Just add to cart and buy.
तो ये सब EMI पे?
और वो भी चुटकी में। On India's fastest growing EMI network. Think it done with Bajaj Finserv.
सर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। साहब, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। हुजूर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता।
अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान।
अपनों को खुशियां दिलाना आसान नहीं बनाते तो आगे कैसे बढ़ते। इसीलिए हम जो भी करते हैं उसे बेहतर बनाते आ रहे हैं, बनाते रहेंगे। बजाज फिनसर्व, थिंक इट डन।
माँ के बेडरूम का एसी या लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई। पुणे, पटना, चेन्नई, मथुरा या फिर बेगूसराय, या फिर बेगूसराय। नए घर के लिए चाहिए 4K टीवी हाई फाई, या फिर वाइफ को चाहिए लेटेस्ट स्टाइल। EMI है ना EMI है ना EMI। मॉड्यूलर किचन में पुराना फ्रिज क्यों है भाई?
शादी है नहीं, मैट्रेस पुराना है भाई। अक्खा इंडिया बोले भाई प्राइजेस है हाई। बेस्ट ही खरीदना है तो अपने EMI स्टोर पर आए।
EMI है ना EMI।
अब काशी हो या वाशी, महंगा लगे तो EMI और बेस्ट ही चाहिए तो भी EMI, क्योंकि बजाज फिनसर्व का EMI है ना। विजिट www.emistore.com।
EMI है ना EMI है ना EMI।
नाची 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 नाची। धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी। नाची 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 नाची। इंश्योरेंस फ्रॉड से बचना है बहुत जरूरी जी। नाची 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 नाची। वो एजेंट है या फ्रॉड पता लगाओ जी। एक्स्ट्रा ऑफर के झांसे में कहीं फंस ना जाओ जी। अगर कोई अनजान कॉलर इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी डिटेल्स मांगे तो कह देना उनको नाची 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 नाची। मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो, हमेशा सेफ रहो जी। Always verify the caller and do not surrender your insurance for attractive offers. हमेशा सावधान रहे, safe रहे. Issued in the interest of public awareness by Bajaj Finserv. नाची 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 नाची। धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी। नाची 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 नाची। जो होगा सो होगा ऐसे ना सोचो जी। कॉल पे कोई पूछे OTP दो ना जी, तो कह देना उनको मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो, हमेशा सेफ रहो जी।
Being a hero is all about heart. It's not about ruling the world. It's about owning it. It's not about winning a race. It's about delivering a smile to the human race. It's about a spirit that just cannot be confined by geographies. It's about the heart that beats for the future and a soul that echoes the values of generations. And yet, being a hero is never about the hero. It's about the millions who celebrate them. Hero Motorcorp, the motorcycle leader. There's a gush of wind that hums a sweet song. There's a gush of wind that fights like a hero to fill the world with possibility. There's a gush of wind that jumps across oceans and mountains, embracing the entire planet. There's a gush of wind that blows away darkness. There's a gush of wind that blows for humanity. Because at Hero, we care.
In 1868, the Tata Group was founded on a philosophy that put the community at the heart of its existence. Today, we are $100 billion global enterprise. Our today has been built on enduring values. Is about delivering excellence across business sectors. Is about building a future-ready nation. Our today has a strong foundation with community at its core. Our today is dedicated to the communities we serve. Our today is always about more than just a day. Our today is a continuous journey for a better tomorrow. Tata, leadership with trust.
Behold, the story of victory, of life over malady. Behold the saga of power, of science over sickness. Behold the tale of triumph, of dedication over disease. Behold the rise and rise of Cadila Pharmaceuticals Limited, one of India's largest privately held pharmaceutical companies based out of Ahmedabad, Gujarat, India. Cadila Pharmaceuticals was born out of the vision of a legend who left an indelible mark in the chronicles of Indian pharmaceuticals industry. He was Indravadan Ambalal Modi, the founder chairman of the company, rightfully christened as the medicine man of India. His vision to alleviate pain of the underprivileged through research-driven innovations has been driving Cadila Pharmaceuticals for more than 6 decades now. Innovations which are backed by the key strengths of the company, the state-of-the-art manufacturing and research facilities. The flagship manufacturing facility at Dholka, Gujarat, sprawls over 100 acres. This avant-garde facility is US FDA approved, besides meeting most of the stringent quality standards across the globe. It manufactures tablets, capsules, injectables, liquids, and orals. The second formulations manufacturing facility is located at Samba in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. The API facilities at Ankleshwar, Gujarat, manufacture a large number of key APIs and intermediates at this US FDA and ISO 9002 and ISO 14001 accredited plant. The company also has set up its first ever overseas formulation manufacturing facility at Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. This world-class facility is the only WHO CGMP compliant manufacturing facility in the region. More than 850 products spread across 12 specialties with many of India's top brands in its basket. Great goals are defined by far-sighted vision and achieved by seamless teamwork. A multicultural, multilingual and multinational workforce of over 7,000 employees is truly the propelling power of the company. Not just in the domestic market, the company has a wide global footprint with over 1,000 marketing authorizations across 85 countries. Its international sales force of over 150 highly diversified and versatile personnel lends it an outreach that blankets the globe. As the company grows, so does its commitment to research. Manned by more than 350 scientists, the R&D facilities of Cadila Pharmaceuticals at Dholka, Gujarat is an institution of breakthrough innovations. To take the focus on innovation to the next level, it partners with leading international companies to discover newer treatments. The Cadila Pharmaceuticals Group is gigantic. Its group companies complement and expand the dynamic vision of the company across new avenues of healthcare and newer fast-paced business areas. Cadila Pharmaceuticals is a gentle giant. Decades of dedicated research, groundbreaking healthcare innovations, and worldwide impact proves the infinite potential of one powerful emotion. Care. The success of Cadila Pharmaceuticals bears testimony to the fact that the care continues.
आने वाले कल की दस्तक हमें सुनाई देती है, नई मंजिल है जिस ओर हमें वो दिशा दिखाई देती है। नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए जोश से निकल पड़े हम, आने वाला कल होगा हमारा। नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
और नए इंडिया के सफर में टेक्नोलॉजी की शक्ति लेकर आपका भागीदार रहेगा रिलायंस। नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
लाइफ में लेना देना तो चलता रहता है। इधर फ्लेक्सी लोन से बोरो कर लिया और उधर बाय मॉम डैड का वेकेशन डन। शादी का डिसीजन लिया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से और बोरो किया। प्रमोशन मिला तो ये लो थोड़ा लोन वापस कर दिया, थैंक यू। नए इंटीरियर्स का दिल किया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से फिर थोड़ा ले लिया। ईयर एंड बोनस मिला तो इस बार लोन ज्यादा वापस कर दिया। लाइफ में लेना देना चलता रहेगा तो लोन्स में क्यों नहीं। इसीलिए फ्लेक्सी लोन फ्रॉम बजाज फिनसर्व एक ऐसा लोन जो जब चाहे बोरो करे, जैसे चाहे रीपे करे, वो भी चुटकी में। थिंक इट डन विद बजाज फिनसर्व।
हेलो, हर सीजन के लिए नए इंटीरियर्स?
हाँ, वो भी हर रूम के लिए।
फ्रिज, स्मार्टफोन या बड़ा टीवी?
तीनों क्यों नहीं?
अरे ये तो शॉपिंग लिस्ट में नहीं था।
So, अब शॉपिंग कार्ट में तो है। सॉरी।
अच्छा, नए आउटफिट्स की विश लिस्ट।
विश क्यों? जस्ट ऐड टू कार्ट एंड बाय।
तो ये सब EMI पे?
और वो भी चुटकी में। On India's fastest growing EMI network. Think it, done with Bajaj Finserv.
सर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। साहब, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। हुजूर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता।
अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान।
अपनों को खुशियां दिलाना आसान नहीं बनाते तो आगे कैसे बढ़ते। इसीलिए हम जो भी करते हैं उसे बेहतर बनाते आ रहे हैं, बनाते रहेंगे। बजाज फिनसर्व, थिंक इट, डन।
माँ के बेडरूम का एसी या लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई। पुणे, पटना, चेन्नई, मथुरा या फिर बेगूसराय,
या फिर बेगूसराय।
नए घर के लिए चाहिए 4K टीवी हाई फाई, या फिर वाइफ को चाहिए लेटेस्ट स्टाइल। EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI।
मॉड्यूलर किचन में पुराना फ्रिज क्यों है भाई?
शादी है नहीं, मैट्रेस पुराना है भाई। अक्खा इंडिया बोले भाई प्राइजेस है हाई, बेस्ट ही खरीदना है तो अपने EMI स्टोर पर आए।
EMI है ना, EMI।
अब काशी हो या वाशी, महंगा लगे तो EMI और बेस्ट ही चाहिए तो भी EMI, क्योंकि बजाज फिनसर्व का EMI है ना। विजिट www.emistore.com।
EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI।
नाची 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 नाची। धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी। नाची 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 नाची। इंश्योरेंस फ्रॉड से बचना है बहुत जरूरी जी। नाची 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 नाची। वो एजेंट है या फ्रॉड पता लगाओ जी, एक्स्ट्रा ऑफर के झांसे में कहीं फंस ना जाओ जी। अगर कोई अनजान कॉलर इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी डिटेल्स मांगे तो कह देना उनको मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो, हमेशा सेफ रहो जी। Always verify the caller and do not surrender your insurance for attractive offers. हमेशा सावधान रहे, सेफ रहे। Issued in the interest of public awareness by Bajaj Finserv. नाची 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 नाची। धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी। नाची 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 नाची। जो होगा सो होगा ऐसे ना सोचो जी। नाची 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 नाची। कॉल पे कोई पूछे OTP दो ना जी, तो कह देना उनको नाची 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 नाची। मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो, हमेशा सेफ रहो जी।
Being a hero is all about heart. It's not about ruling the world. It's about owning it. It's not about winning a race. It's about delivering a smile to the human race. It's about a spirit that just cannot be confined by geographies. It's about the heart that beats for the future and a soul that echoes the values of generations. And yet, being a hero is never about the hero. It's about the millions who celebrate them. Hero Motorcorp, the motorcycle leader.
We have
Sorry to interrupt. We are just going live now at 3 p.m. Yeah.
So we are live now, Seema?
Yes,
start?
please. Yes, please.
Tell me
We are
when
live now. Yeah.
Can I start?
Yes, Chairman, you can start, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of those joining us, as we have participants from across the globe and panelists also from across the globe. My very special welcome to this 27th edition of the CII Partnership Summit 2021 and to this session on circular economy, building partnerships for the transition. In this partnership summit, there are over 50 sessions spread over 3 days, including 7 country sessions, close to 200 speakers from more than 40 countries, which includes 20 overseas ministers, 7 Indian ministers, 25 global CXOs, more than 100 heads of institutions, leaders, experts from around the world, delegates participating from more than 100 countries, spread over the 3 days. Over 50 participants at the virtual investment pavilion. As far as circular economy, I think that is the most important point today, especially when we are talking of carbon reduction, carbon neutral. So it refers to a system that is restorative or regenerative by intention and design. It aims to substitute the end-of-life concept with restoration and facilitate the use of resources in an efficient manner. Mark a shift towards the use of renewable energy, eliminate use of toxic chemicals which impair reuse, and above all focus on elimination of waste through the superior design of materials, products, and systems. With a circular process, one can find business opportunities for existing and new companies. For example, by taking back, renovating, and selling the product or parts of the product again. It can also be by taking back materials and or components and using them or recycling them. I think may not be 100%, maybe 50% of the materials that we bring back we can use. Such processes call in for devising new business models and strategies, focusing on products in terms of designing to avoid landfilling and increasing the use of renewable materials in the value chain. We know in many European companies like ours, Saint-Gobain also, where landfill, the quantity that we do for landfilling is measured every year. And there is a target how we have to reduce over the period of time. And there is a target at the end of 5 years that it should be near zero. It's pertinent, therefore, to point out the critical role of collaboration between nations and industries to synchronize material flows in moving from a linear to a circular trajectory globally. Work, for instance, is being conducted by organizations like OECD at the intersection of circular economy and international trade. The OECD research suggests that it's important to reduce trade of resources between countries, which is bad for circular economy and waste management. An example of this is dumping of plastic waste in less developed countries. Logically, countries which are good at recycling should focus on recycling, and trade should be done keeping that in mind. This would further help in increasing resource efficiency and circular economy. In India, also, CII is supporting and we are mobilizing all the key stakeholders in managing non-degradable materials like plastic through better policy frameworks such as the extended producer responsibility routes of plastic waste management and end-of-life plastic management projects, also restricting or banning the use of very thin plastic, one-use plastics. So the recent launch of the India Plastics Pact, the first in Asia, CII has recently concluded 16th Sustainability Summit in September, 2021 is one such initiative aiming to bring together leading businesses at a national level to make commitments for building a circular system for plastics and making 100% plastic packaging reusable or recyclable. Backed by RAP, a global NGO based in the UK, it is inspired from other plastic projects. Plastic packs around the world. Since plastics were mass produced 7 years, their production rate has risen. Globally, 8.3 billion tons of virgin plastics are being produced to date. This is a positive step towards keeping plastic in the economy and out of the natural environment, and to empower businesses, governments, and the entire plastics value chain to transition towards a circular economy for plastics in India. This is also an example of cross-border partnerships on pertinent topics like circular economy, particularly looking for plastics to take action by multi-stakeholders. It is evident that the economic case for circularity is gradually developing, with alarm bells ringing to arrest the rapidly degrading ecological resources that threaten survival of human species. Economics of resources is undergoing a gradual change. But for it to replace centuries-old linear thinking, countries must realize that it is in the interest of their own growth and competitiveness as well. Circular economy calls for widespread collaboration among stakeholders such as industry, government, and consumers. It calls for a completely revamped way of thinking, new business models based upon sharing, using bio-based raw materials, and renewable forms of energy. So companies may have to, circular economy may also call for return to the drawing board to redesign products to meet the demands of today's resource-stressed world. I always end my speech with something on water. In India, especially where we are water-starved, reuse of sewage treated water for industrial purposes, gardening should be 100%. So that's another circular economy as such, because India is a country where the water starvation is there. We have to do it. And with this, I am pleased to highlight we have esteemed speakers from organizations belonging to various industry sectors, institutions, and academia. And they will be sharing their valuable insights on material flows and cross-cutting measures to support this systematic change through innovation and investments. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Susan Kadner, Managing Director, Circular Economy Initiative Deutschland, Mr. Marcus Kover, CEO RAP, Mr. Luca Miani, Head of Circular Economy, NL Holdings, Mr. Freek van Ejek, Director Holland, Circular Hotspot, Mrs. Adriana Marina, Founder, Animana, Mr. Gunjan Bhardwaj, CEO, Inoplex AG Germany, and Dr. Ashok Khosla, Chairman and Founder, Development Alternatives. So I first welcome Dr. Susan Kadner. She is convinced that reaching our climate target requires fundamentally different way of using resources. Dr. Susan initiated the Circular Economy Initiative, Germany at Acatech, National Academy of Science and Engineering. She leads the head office of the state and industry funding initiative, which aims at defining the transition towards a resource-efficient and digitally enabled circular economy with stakeholders from politics, science, industry, and civil society. In addition, Susan is the co-lead for energy, resources, and sustainability at Acatech. Before that, Susan worked for 10 years at Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, where she was the head of science and deputy head of Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. In this function, she co-authored and managed the 5th assessment report, which provided the scientific basis for United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in the Paris Agreement. Before starting a career on the science-policy interface, Suzanna studied oceanography at the University of Southampton and received her PhD in analytical chemistry and marine microbiology from the University of East Anglia. I now invite Suzanna to address the gathering. Please, Suzanna, you can continue.
Yes, Mr. Eisenhower, thank you very much for the kind introduction and for the invitation to participate in today's panel discussion. I'm really looking forward to engage with all the interesting panelists in the next 1.5 hours. Let me start with these numbers because I think they are so important, those numbers from the IRP report in 2018, which basically show that climate change protection and the protection of resources are two sides of the same coin. It says that the extraction and the refinement of natural resources causes 50% of global greenhouse gas emissions and 90% of water stress and biodiversity loss. So it is really important, and we are very glad to see that the transition of the energy sector to act exactly against these GHG emissions, but also the transition in the mobility sector towards more electrification is already in full swing or is just starting to take place. But we need to understand, of course, that these transitions are again associated with completely different demands in minerals, in metals. And the IEA has recently published a report on that, which basically says that if we want to reach our goal of greenhouse gas neutrality in 2050, the demand for mineral resources is going to increase 6-fold. And this will mean 40 million tons per year in the year 2050. So this is an enormous amount. And in Germany specifically, we are very dependent on imports of such materials, not only fossil fuels, where we are moving away from, but even more so for the metals and the high-tech metals that we need for traction batteries, that we need for wind turbines, for solar panels, so on and so forth. And despite having really 30 years of experience in circular economy policy, in recycling policy, sometimes it's a bit disappointing what has come out of it. We have really, really high recycling rates, and this is important to emphasize, so that the infrastructure for this is working well. We have recycling rates of up to 80%. But then if we look at how much of this recycled, of the secondary material is really used or could be used to replace primary materials, we reach numbers of 13 to 18%, just depending on whether the global supply chain has been taken into account or not. So there's certainly room for improvement. And we see that some of our European neighbors here are far more advanced concerning that topic. And of course, we look at our partners in the Netherlands for the discussion here as well. So this was really the motivation to set up the Circular Economy Initiative in Germany, together with partners from industry, as it was mentioned before, with partners from academia and with civil society organizations. And one aspect we really wanted to start quantifying as well is in how far different circular economy measures like extended product life and intensified use through sharing, for example, or much better recycling with high quality recyclates that come out of the end of the process, in how much they can contribute really to greenhouse gas emission reductions and resource savings. And we undertook a little modeling exercise where we had a climate policy model or a reference scenario that sort of like represented all the climate policies that were in place at the time. And that climate scenario, we had a circular economy scenario, which actually looked at these different measures like extending product life, intensifying sharing, and improving recycling. And we saw that these measures really contribute to a drastic reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the remaining emissions that were necessary to reach greenhouse gas neutrality in 2050, but also that resource savings up to 70% are possible. And that's very promising because, as was mentioned by Mr. Eisenhower before, this is really the motivation why we should engage on a circular economy. It's not an end in itself, but it needs to contribute to solving some of the environmental problems that we are seeing today. If we want to really, have this potential come into reality, of course, we know there is a paradigm shift or a very big change in perspective necessary. And I'm just going to mention a few of those. We need to go away from this waste focus and recycling focus. It's very important, but it's one lever of a circular economy. The avoidance of waste status, of course, it's important, but we need to go to the product focus. And that starts with the design for durability, repairability, and recyclability. We need to move away from this extended producer liability, which only really kicks in at the end of the life cycle, but we need to look at the entire life cycle and therefore really think more about a circular producer liability. We need to move away from this exception approach as we have at the moment at the European level with the eco-design directive, which is only applicable to specific products, but really extend this to a standard approach for where the eco-design criteria apply also for materials, not just for energy efficiency, and includes the focus on different circular economy strategies. We need to move away from product anonymity. This is very important if we think about partnerships, because the producer at the moment doesn't know usually where the product is, what the state of health of the product is, and how he could return it back. So product identity, the keyword here is a product passport, is really something very important. Get the data that you need in order to engage in a circular management of your product. And then product design is important, but let's extend this view towards system design. How can we support the partnerships between the different companies involved and really start to establish circular value networks? This is something very important. And we think that there's a huge innovation potential behind that. For raw materials providers, for example, they can not just provide primary raw materials, it can engage as providing high quality recyclates, high quality secondary materials, CO2-based materials, bio-based materials, so really open the perspective for the substitution as well, and the necessary collaboration, that's important. For manufacturing industry also, it becomes really, really interesting. The development of new business models that moves away from the pure product focus, where you mainly have like a repair service associated with it, but more towards the performance or the results-orientated focus. So if you have a laser cutter, for example, you stay responsible for the product, you control the activity, you know what the resource is, the resource use of the processes are, how you can improve the processes, you gather the data, you can improve your own equipment, and you have a very, very close customer relationship that can be established. So very interesting potentials coming up there. And I've just mentioned this, digital technologies are a key enabler. We need to know more about the data of the product, but the digital technologies can also help us make really more educated decisions. For example, at the end of the first life cycle, whether it's good to put the product or component of the product into recycling, or whether it's better to repair them, replace them, and put a remanufactured product back on the market. So these are some of the thoughts and ideas which we'll probably develop on. And these were the thoughts that also guided us in the Circular Economy Initiative. We looked at 3 topics: circular business models, traction batteries, and plastic packaging. And it was important for us to have the entire value chain sitting at the table and jointly discussing what the opportunities are, what the barriers are, and then jointly define how a roadmap towards more circularity or towards a true circular economy in Germany could be developed. And so this is really where I'm going to stop here and hand over to Mr. Eisenhower and look forward to the questions that come up.
Thank you, Susan. I think we'll have the questions towards the end of after all the panelists speak.
Sure.
So I would now introduce Mr. Marcus Gower, CEO of RAP UK. Marcus has worked in the environment sector for over 25 years and has been a Chief Executive Officer of RAP since 2016. RAP is an independent charity working in the UK and internationally to tackle the climate emergency by changing the way we use and reuse natural resources. It specializes in the sustainability of food, plastics, and clothing. A scientist by background, Marcus is a passionate believer in the need for cross-sector collaboration to create total systems change from policymaker and business leader actions to inspiring and involving individuals. He is pioneering the creation of global circular economy, ensuring RAP's expertise in the evidence-led program is shared across the country and sector boundaries to generate maximum positive impact. Prior to RAP, Marcus worked across environmental programs in the UK and abroad for organizations, including a startup renewable energy company, and international technical services business. He has a PhD in chemical engineering from Imperial College London, as well as an executive MBA from Greenfield School of Management. He's a fellow of the Institution of Chemical Engineers and a trustee of the Chartered Institution of Waste Management. Outside of work, he's a chair of the Ridgeway Education Trust in Didcot. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Marcus to address this. Mr. Marcus, please.
Well, thank you very much for your kind introduction, and it's a real honor to address this CII Partnership Summit today. WRAP is a global NGO, and we bring together governments, businesses, citizens to create a better world, a world where we treat the planet with respect and we value our natural resources, and where we value people too. We want to help all people make the most of our planet's precious resources. We focus where we believe change is needed and where we know we can make a difference. And the priority areas for us are food, plastic, and textiles. Now, our model is based on systems thinking. We have to look at the whole system if we want to create lasting, sustainable change. A few projects will not be enough. And the model is also based on collaboration. You can't change a system unless all players in the system work together. No one business or even one government can do it alone. And at WRAP, we believe that we will not fix climate change unless we fix the global systems that are driving it. The systems that govern the food we eat, the clothes we wear, and the goods we buy. And as we just heard, globally, these account for nearly half of all greenhouse gas emissions. Climate action is not all about power generation and transport, although these are clearly very important. And that was the message that WRAP took to COP26 recently, and a message we'll continue to promote. Despite the significant outcomes of COP26, we feel that a lack of focus, especially by developed economies, on consumption emissions was a missed opportunity. There was a missed opportunity for countries to take responsibility for all of their greenhouse gas emissions, and a missed opportunity to help those countries which supply the developed world and work together with them in true partnership to keep 1.5 degrees alive. Now, tackling consumption emissions would mean working along value chains back to the roots of production and forward to the point of use. It would mean working with suppliers and customers across national boundaries to tackle scopes 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions. Now, if we're going to decarbonize the food we eat and the products we buy, we will need to reboot our linear take, make, waste economies into circular ones where resources are used sustainably. We can only do this by working together, though, in partnership to transform those systems that we rely on. Now, we see this in the UK. We have focused strongly in the UK on decarbonising our energy system, and it's delivered good results with a reduction of over 40% since 1990 in territorial greenhouse gas emissions. But economies don't just run on energy. What about the greenhouse gas emissions outside our country, producing our food and goods? It's the footprint that counts. And if we look at the UK's consumption emissions, including emissions embedded in imported products, the reduction since 1990 is much less. We have to take responsibility for those consumption emissions if we want to achieve true net zero, and the same applies to other developed countries. Now, increasing resource efficiency is critical for doing this, and that's why we worked with the University of Leeds in the UK to look at what could be achieved. And in March of this year, we published a report called Net Zero, Why Resource Efficiency Holds the Answers. And that looked at 8 resource efficiency strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which also create jobs at the same time. 3 of those 8 related to food. And it's not surprising when you consider that the global food system accounts for around 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. And also that we waste 1/3 of all the food we produce. And that's why 1 billion people go hungry, and probably will be 2 billion more mouths to feed by 2050. The other 5 strategies were about the circular economy, and they include moving to more resource efficient business models, increasing repair and reuse, and recycling more. Now, what can be achieved is really quite staggering. In the UK, cumulatively to 2050, those 8 strategies could reduce UK greenhouse gas consumption emissions by 2 billion tonnes, which is a huge amount. Not only that, but just the increasing repair and refurbishment of products associated with that would add £60 billion to our economy and create over 300,000 jobs. So just think what would be possible if the whole world did this. Now, these strategies for resource efficiency depend on collaboration. As I said earlier, no one business can do it alone. And we've developed a framework to support that collaborative change. Our voluntary agreements create a pre-competitive, safe space for business to work together. And those voluntary agreements bring whole supply chains together so that actions and solutions work across borders and change happens at scale. So on food, The Courtauld Commitment controls 95% of all food and drink put on UK tables. The UK Plastics Pact is 85% of the plastics packaging sold through UK retailers. And Textiles 2030, which has only just started, is 60% of all textiles supplied in the UK. And because these voluntary agreements have scale, when they change, the whole system changes. And they unite partners behind clear, measurable targets, which WRAP reports on and holds the businesses to account on. They can move quickly too. They don't have to wait for regulation. Regulation takes time to be designed, consulted on, and implemented. Now, most importantly, these deliver results. So the Courtauld Commitment has reduced food waste by 27% already. That's saving £5 billion per year. And its members have now committed to halving the greenhouse gas emissions associated with producing and consuming food in the UK by 2030. The Sustainable Clothing Action Plan reduced the carbon and water footprints of clothing in the UK by 20%. And the UK Plastics Pact has, since 2018, eliminated half of problematic and unnecessary packaging, increased recyclability to 70%, and doubled the recycled content of plastics packaging. And that model is gaining traction all around the world. The Courtauld Commitment is being replicated in Mexico, Indonesia, South Africa, Australia, US, and Canada. And there are now 13 plastics pacts, with, of course, the most recent one being India. Now, in this work, we always work with partners. Global partnerships are critical to accelerate change. Partners like WWF, the World Economic Forum, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and more. But national partnerships are critical too, to make sure that the change is suited to the country. We can't just pick up a model from the UK and move it somewhere else. We also need government support. These programs are public-private partnerships between business and government. And we're absolutely delighted to be working in partnership with CII and WWF to develop and run India's Plastics Pact. Now, that pact, which launched this year,
Here's what I found.
is setting national targets already. And it is helping to keep plastic out in the environment and in the economy, driving collaboration and change. India is on an exciting and powerful trajectory. The opportunities are endless, and we are excited to be working with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus, for your enlightening speech. I think the participants would have more questions on it. I would now move to Mr. Luca Mieni. He heads the circular economy in NL Holdings. Mr. Luca Mieni, other than his job, is also in charge of supporting business line initiatives in circular economy, coordinating cross-divisional activities, and positioning the NL Holding Group externally. He has assisted the European Commission, providing advice and expertise to support the development and financing of circular economy in the member states. Now, I would request Mr. Luca Mieni to address the participants. Thank you, Mr. Luca, please.
Yeah, thank you. First, I spend a few words about Enel, just to tell what's our business about and why we are engaged on circular economy. Enel is an integrated utility working both in renewable energy production, in smart grid and transmission, and in final consumption solution. And we are active in around 35 countries worldwide, included India. And we started with a strong engagement on decarbonization, so taking a strong commitment on a decarbonization path around 7 years ago. And soon after, we started also a strong focus on circular economy more broadly. For us, this is an important point because the transition of the business model is not just about the decarbonization of the production, it's also about how do we build our assets, how do we operate them, what do we do with the end of life. So as the need of strong decarbonization will require a massive implementation of renewable energy production, electric vehicles, battery, etc., it's important that all these new technology are built and their whole life is managed in a circular economy perspective. And this goes back to an important point on circular economy, that is that circular economy, first of all, is about design. It's about how you, the material you use, how you foresee the whole life of the asset already in the design phase. On this, this of course requires a strong collaboration along the whole value chain, because you need to collaborate with your tier 1 supplier, but these suppliers need to engage their suppliers. So basically you need to engage all the upstream value chain up to the raw material and the energy you start with. And in this respect, we started around 4 years ago with a huge initiative from our procurement aimed at measuring the circularity of what we buy. So we had a process in place to measure the circularity. That means the material, the energy consumption of the asset we buy from the raw material to the final delivery. Try to measuring, recognize the benefit for those that are more performing among our suppliers, and above all, co-designing with our suppliers, because this is an important point. And this is about the collaboration topic that we mentioned before. Circular economy required a system change, so it's not just about asking the suppliers to have something more circular. You also need to consider your requirements, because you also need to change your requirements in order to allow the suppliers to deliver more circular solutions. And this, if we change the perspective, is true as well at a country level, because many circular solutions in many countries today are slowed down or are stopped from legislation, for example, that does not allow the flow of material from a sector to another, because generally the legislation, at least above all in Europe, consider each sector as standalone, and when a material reaches end of life, it becomes waste. Whereas in a circular economy perspective, you should be able to find a new solution, a new interconnection in this perspective. And this requires a strong collaboration with the institution to understand how the legislation should evolve to be future-proof. And at the same time, needs different interaction among the industrial sector as well, because you can find synergies and collaboration with sectors that historically were not your partners. But in the perspective of closing the loop on plastic, on materials, or in the perspective of building, recycling factories for critical material, or to develop a new solution and new materials, you can find synergy with the sector totally unrelated to your own. So in this respect, we see strong relevance in working with all our suppliers in this direction. The collaboration needs to be strongly metric-based, because to understand what you are doing, you need a metrics behind that somehow has an assessment on the overall impact of what we are doing. Because another important point about circular economy, it is that you need to address it in a systemic view. So not just to focus on the single step of the value chain you are taking care of, but understanding what happens upstream and what happens downstream of your part of the activity, because you need to ensure that there is an overall improvement in environmental terms. And in this way, you can also achieve an economic benefit. Because if you start implementing circular economy in a single step phase, generally it's difficult that it can be also economically competitive. But if you address it in an end-to-end perspective, so recovering value along the whole value chain, competitive. And this is another critical point about circular economy, because to really scale it up, you need to find innovative solutions that are actually also competitive. Otherwise, it would remain as something marginal or something specific. And in all this activity that I mentioned before, to achieve all this target, the collaboration is key. As I said, the collaboration within the value chain, across the value chain, and also with the different sector, institution or NGO, etc., because it's really about basically redefine the value chain. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Luca. I think quite clear, and I'm sure the participants should have enjoyed it. So with this, I now move on to Mr. Freak Van Ijit. I don't know whether I pronounced it correctly. Please excuse me if I made a mistake. I think Mr. Freak is the CEO of Holland's Circular Hotspot, a private public platform that facilitates the transition to a circular economy at the international level by bringing together government authorities, knowledge institutes, and especially businesses. HCH supports knowledge exchange with the aim to stimulate entrepreneurship in the field of circular economy. He is co-chair of the coordination group of the European Union Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. Freak is also the vice chair of the Circular Bio-Based Delta, an alliance of Dutch provinces, businesses, and knowledge centers pioneering a sustainable circular and bio-based economy. He is one of the more senior European Union experts in the field of waste management and circular economy, and has been described as a mover and a shaker. Previously, he served for over a decade as Director of Strategy and PA at multinational Suez, and as a board member at the Dutch Waste Management Association, the Society and Enterprise Foundation, and acted as Sherpa of the European Union Innovation Partnership on raw materials. Very impressive, Mr. Freak. He is a MSc in engineering from the Delft University of Technologies. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will now request Mr. Freak Van Ijit to address us. Mr. Freak.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Much appreciated and honored to be part of this distinguished panel. So this event is about building partnership for the transition. Let me start with a few one-liners I think we in the Netherlands believe in a lot. Adapting to a circular economy, that's crucial for our future. And we believe that the societal price for not acting will be unpayable. But at the same time, and this is a little bit in the Dutch nature, we think in opportunities. Circular economy could be the biggest business opportunity of this century. But collaboration and a system approach is key. And in the Netherlands, I think we are considered a circular front runner, and our collaborative, innovative nature can be a little bit explained by our history. If you look at our country, it's ridiculous. It shouldn't exist. It's one of the most vulnerable deltas in the world. But we Dutchies, we were very stubborn. We were working together and managed to keep our feet dry. We were early industrialized, heavily polluted, but we were managed to collaborate and keep our country livable and our industry viable. And now circular economy. We are a country without resources. We need to collaborate together, not only within the Netherlands, but also at international level to secure a future for ourselves and our industry. Now, if you look at my country, we have adopted a mighty ambition. We want to be fully circular in the Netherlands by 2050. That's a call you can't reach alone. Now, what our government did was having an ambition which managed to bind the positive energy in society, the multinationals, the SME, the local governments, and the younger generation. And one of the things they did is to focus on 5 transition agendas, 5 priority sectors, like agri-food, plastics, manufacturing, construction, just to mention a few. But a government can't do this alone. If you look just at the construction sector, a government might own 4%, 5% of all the buildings in a city, but 95% not. For that, they have to reach out to the housing corporations, the builders, the architects, the designers. They can't reach this transition alone. And it's the same focus is good, then others can follow. But just by having an ambition and a focus on sectors, that's not enough. You also have to tweak the system. And what our government is doing is actually giving governmental incentives that allow others to act and to scale. It's, of course, setting new legislation and regulations. It's working with the carrots and the sticks, rewarding things and punishing others. It's about creating access to finance. Finance is the oil in the system, if you want, because circular economy often has a higher upfront cost than other models. So you have to make it more accessible for circular economy. It's about new incentives for knowledge and innovation. For instance, we focus a lot on circular windmills or chemical recycling as a future opportunity. It's about reaching out to the consumers, how they behave, how they separate their waste, and if they buy a new phone or they're actually considering taking it as a service. And it's about international collaboration, because it makes no sense to make a circular island of the Netherlands if the rest of the world goes down the drain. We need you. We need India to be successful for our own future as well. And you can only do this together. Government, companies, knowledge institutes, consumers, we all have a role to play. We have to clearly divide these tasks as well. Now, one of the most important partners in this is, I think, business, because they show guts, they invest, they're the ones responsible actually for scaling up. And, you know, if you look at it from their perspective, circular economy is a big opportunity. It can be platform models, can mean more revenues, the market gets bigger. If you give something a second or third life, it means, let's say, more value from the same amount of materials, but it also means that you have to develop refurbishment capabilities. It means that you have to organize return systems and convince your customers to do so. And talking together in a value chain, partnerships, is also about creating resilience, is knowing what the other needs and, let's say, reducing risk. And it always starts with less waste, less energy, less materials, and that makes sense because it's reducing your cost level. But again, they can't do it alone. And often for businesses, it starts with a transition. You know, you start traditionally with waste management and using less resources. And that's good. But if you do a decent job, probably you have a 5% incremental change a year, just looking in your back garden. But if you want to go more to 20, 50%, you have to look to your suppliers, to your customers. And if you approach it together, you probably can reduce up to 50%. But it still won't be enough, because we have to think here in reducing waste maybe towards 100%. And for that, you need to involve to other concepts. You need to think about design. You need to think about products as a service, new business models. So circular economy for us and for businesses is a path with a clear goal, but with a little bit an uncertain path. But it's, I think the Dutch pragmatism is nice here. Learning by doing. You either win or you learn. And I think this example of plastics has been mentioned by Eisenhower, for instance. Plastics is a great material, but a very unsustainable waste record. Now, if you want to close the loop for plastics, you have to collect it, you have to sort it, to process it, you have to apply it. It has a negative value, waste plastic. So in order to collect it, you need an EPR system in place. That's national government. You need a local waste management infrastructure. That's local government. You need to communicate to inhabitants to separate their waste. Then you need either to work with the informal sector or with the waste management sector to collect the waste and create a quality that industry actually can use. And in order to use this recyclate, you need to redesign your products and actually apply it and convince the consumers to buy it. So if one of these steps is missing, nothing will happen. Now, in the Netherlands, we have two programs to stimulate circular economy. One national program, we call it the House of Acceleration, and the international program. And that's, I have one of the nicest jobs in the world. I'm the CEO of this international program, Holland Circular Hotspot. And what we want to do, make circular economy happen at the international level by sharing best practices from business, by sharing the insights and tools from knowledge institutes, and also sharing the hard-earned lessons from our government, because basically we made all the mistakes in the past and you can really learn from our mistakes as well. And we share a lot. Circular economy is not about copyright, but about the right to copy. And the role of circular economy hubs is very interesting. We are considered a circular economy hub. We are not for profit, we are apolitical, and we're something like transition brokers, we're catalysts. And we see them everywhere in the world, from Nigeria, from Lagos, from Vietnam, to Brazil, to, of course, organizations like REP. They are everywhere. And there is momentum, especially after COVID-19, because what they do, they basically combine the top-down level, the governmental action, with the bottom-up level in industry. Initiatives from SMEs, from NGOs, from knowledge institutes. They can combine the two worlds and, let's say, make that happen. And I want to, let's say, with this pledge to create platforms to make this world of the public and private and knowledge domain come together, I'd like to close. But the famous African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And as the Netherlands, we would love to reach out to India to see how we can work together further. Back to you, Eisenhower.
Thank you, sir. I think we have a lot of questions to you. Maybe at the end of the session, we will come because we need a lot of inputs. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we move to the next panelist, Mrs. Adriana Marina. She is the founder of Animana. And she's got a lot born in the heart in Argentina, so another country where we are not very far away from us in economy. So she has a PhD in economics and is an expert on convergence, growth, inequality, and local development. She has learned how to understand the economic systems which should be combined to drive change business practice into sustainable business models. I think it'd be good to hear from her because some of them could be very relevant to India. Over to Adriana, please.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel and to see that so many people, we are in the same way, doing this effort. And I would like, as a leader of Hecho por Nosotros, an international NGO that gather professionals, micro, small, medium firms, and efforts from the grassroots to bring on board solutions. Yes, I don't want to repeat, and understanding that what we need is to collaborate. My work all these last 12 years was focused on how to make collaboration work around sustainability and circular models. So our concepts and our work is how we make this systemic change alive, and is what we are proposing and doing right now in action, driven by micro, small, medium firms, artisans, and local people. Because I think that the solutions and the voices that are very low and weak around the world are the solutions from the grassroots. And I think at the grassroots is where there is wisdom. There are so many solutions that the system driven by profit is not able to listen. And many of the solutions are think inside the same system. Yes, that's why if we talk around fashion, I don't want to lose a lot of time around numbers. We have to think that this industry, fashion, is waste, is mostly plastic, and is giving us a lot of problems in our health, in our oceans, rivers. And if we want to talk around circularity and sustainability, I think we have to go to the people, to biodiversity, to ecosystems, yes, because they know how to care, because the nature, their ecosystem, their biodiversity is their own fabric. So they have such an important message, and they are so smart and intelligent in order to give us solutions. So the work of Hecho por Nosotros and Animana is based on this knowledge in interaction and in dialogue with different stakeholders around the world. So we work on what we launched. I will share afterwards some links at the high-level political forum, the platform based on the grassroots, igniting circular and sustainable fashion through collaboration. And these collaborations should be listened in like big letters, no? How we put all these actors together. And this is the huge value that Hecho por Nosotros has to offer to the world. Focus in also how when we see the solutions around, they are always noted in the same, let's say, consumer area, yes, or countries in the north that they are much around the consumers. We have to work and give voices, strong voices, strong solutions at the grassroots, where the fragmented value chains and the lack of incentives to include good practices is a huge part of the worldwide problems our society has. And I don't see projects and big voices talking around this, how we make this connection, how we integrate. At the same time, the solutions are available. We have now technology, but we have to think technology as a bridge, as a tool, and to work with this grassroots in order to use the technology to give their own narratives, to share with the world, with the market, with the next stages of the value chain, their solutions, their core business, and at the same time help them to incentivize to grow their business around sustainability and good practices. Because if we go to the South, Latin America, India, Africa, and we see how many excellent entrepreneurs, how many case studies, how many knowledge. At Hecho por Nosotros in India, we have many leaders that are experts on this and are on board as Pranav Khanna, as Anita Aguja. All these resources around the world should be put together in dialogue. And this is the proposal of Hecho por Nosotros, launching this Igniting Circular and Sustainable Fashion through collaboration. Because the ones that are doing efforts, what we find is that they are quite very alone. They are all the time navigating huge problems to survive. And these should be the big firms of the future, yes? And we need to collaborate and integrate in the value chain in order to success in this circular economy that we need. Sustainable development goals are an excellent, let's say, framework to work around. And the fashion industry, of course, tackles the 17 sustainable development goals. So they are they help us to organize and understand how many areas we are doing bad in our system, no? But what we find is that the sustainable development goals are more a report that the real action and a real voice of the ones that are at the grassroots and that they produce, and they are the ones that are in contact with the resources and the biodiversity. So we launched this ecosystem where all stakeholders, World Economic Forum, UNESE with the traceability and transparency value in the value chains of textiles, leather, and the fashion industry, academics, designers. Designers should be the main actors, but the careers in these days, the universities prepare the designers for the industry we have. So at Hecho por Nosotros, we launched all a beta version for a systemic change and design materials and tools in order that designers around the world.
Most Adriana, maybe little taking it long.
What? Sorry.
Could please finish it fast. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So what we think is, what we propose is this systemic change. We have been working with Ashoka International IKEA Foundation, but at the same time, when you go for financing this ecosystem that are alive, we have all the stakeholders around and solutions that are so important for integrating the value chains. It's so difficult to get this support. So welcome all to be part of Hecho con Nosotros, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Adriana. I think we would now move on to Dr. Gunjan Bhardwaj, who is the CEO of Innoplex AG. After studying in IIT Bombay, he has had training and studied with MIT Sloan and EPS Ostrich Winkel. He worked for BCG and Ernst & Young. I think he's got a lot of patent applications and has authored several publications. And it would be great to hear from Dr. Gunjan Bhardwaj. Dr. Gunjan Bhardwaj, please.
Thanks a lot for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be and a matter of great pride to be in this August gathering, and especially speaking on a very important topic, which is also close to my heart. Innoplexus is a company specializing in drug discovery and development. Our focus is healthcare, and we leverage AI and deep tech to do that. And of course, we have heard a lot on the circular economy, but the transition towards a circular economy, which, with all the talk and push, especially by the European Union, has not really reaped results as we would expect, at least in this group. Since 2019, we still are around 9% circular. There's a lot that needs to be done. The transition towards a circular economy in healthcare can also provide a major opportunity to yield substantial health benefits, especially for countries such as India. And at the same time, of course, help us achieve the sustainable development goals. And this year has been phenomenal in terms of that progress, because the transition towards a circular healthcare economy has been quite substantial. The pandemic has led to a focus, as you all know, on the need to reuse medical devices. And it also underscored the need for hospitals to critically understand their supply chains. We saw with the shortage in the second wave in some of the countries in terms of the infrastructure, some of the medical equipment that were needed, and how that need was addressed by bringing in some of those equipment which were actually in use in Europe and other parts of the world to India. But as I mentioned, this still remains a big challenge, given, even though we have been talking about a lot around circular economy, and there has been a fillip this year, specifically in healthcare, but the progress is very limited. There are 4 elements that I personally believe, or 4 drivers that would drive real progress. The first is leadership, of course. I mean, if you talk of circular economy and all these examples in 2019, you may recount there were a couple of companies that won awards, technology companies. One was Winnow, which developed technology to help chefs achieve better visibility in the kitchens so that they can make better decisions to reduce food waste, but also reduce costs. There were Tricyclos, which operated the largest network of recycling stations in Southern America. But when you think of healthcare, or just if someone were to ask you, what are the champions of circular economy in terms of companies, you may not be able to think of a single name. So all the great companies that are making a genuine effort in this space, that these companies need to be celebrated and efforts need to be celebrated, that it motivates others as well. Now, in 2019, surprisingly, at least to me, even though European Commission has started a lot of initiatives, etc., we haven't really moved the cheese in Europe. The European Commission got the prize for public sector leadership in the WEF, but nothing really over the past 2 years has moved. Part of it, I mean, unlike waste management, etc., if you look at the other aspects, I think part of it could also be attributed to legacy systems and legacy infrastructure, what countries such as India do not have. But as I mentioned, leadership is absolutely essential, and we need to find out ways to celebrate and recognize companies that really move the cheese in this space in different sectors, and healthcare, for that matter, is a very important sector. The second driver is leveraging the power of Web 3.0 or Industry 4.0, however you want to call it. The potential of technology and value chain innovations, not just in electronics and plastics, because we know a lot has happened there, but from shaping provenance tools to product passports or Internet of Materials, there is a lot more of innovation that can come in quickly, leveraging these technologies. And some of the bigger companies have set up contests, and Google is doing its bit, some of the other companies as well. But we haven't really looked at tapping Industry 4.0 or Web 3.0 technologies to really get there. The third driver is, of course, circular material value chains that we have, and we have talked about it with some of these speakers here have alluded to some of the programs, and we know the Global Plastic Action Partnership. But what we are seeing is more and more we are, on the side of food. A great example is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which has been working on circular economy for food. And India, which sees almost 40% of the food produce is wasted, transportation and storage. It could globally generate $2.7 trillion in benefits for society and environment, and avert an estimated 5 million deaths every year till 2050. So food is extremely important. There is so much to be done. And of course, fashion, and a speaker before me referred to the circular textiles initiatives, which again is super important. And some countries in Europe have done some good things. One simple example is France, that passed a law to forbid the practice of burning unsold clothes. And we hope there is more action in this direction. So unsold clothes or used clothes, how can we bring in? We see there is so much of need in some parts of the world, and there is a huge wastage in this part of the world. So how can we bring in circular textiles initiatives or circular clothing initiatives, and kind of move towards circular material value chains locally, of course, when it comes to food or clothing, but also globally. And fourth, as some colleagues mentioned, collaboration is absolutely essential. As I mentioned, after all of the effort in Europe, mostly on a public sector level, but also by some of the private initiatives, we haven't really made huge progress. And that needs to be changed. And it could only happen when there is true partnership, true collaboration between not just the public sector or policymakers or policy instruments or initiatives, but also in a wider industry. Because only through the efforts of all the stakeholders, we can really see material progress. And I believe the circular economy must become a part of the broader culture, the way of thinking and acting of all stakeholders involved. So it's this underlying ethos of consumerism that we have as a philosophy of life, as a way of thinking, that needs to be addressed right in the schools. So there is a lot of awareness related work that we also need to do, that people, citizens, right from the beginning, know why the economy has to be circular and the waste needs to be minimized. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Gunjan. I think really brought out some interesting points on food and clothes, something which at least I did not think of it earlier. I think that's a very good point that you made. Thank you, Dr. Gunjan. Now we move on to the next speaker, Dr. Ashok Khosla, who is a global environmentalist based in Delhi. He has set up the first office of environment and then UNEP's global information system. He subsequently founded Development Alternatives. He has served for a decade and was as a founding co-chair of the United Nations Environment Program on the International Resource Panel. And he was also president of IUCN and Club of Rome. I think Dr. Khosla would bring in a lot of inputs in his address from his experiences in these areas. Dr. Khosla, please. Dr. Khosla?
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, good. Thank you, Ike, for your introduction. You know, it's awfully difficult to follow six experts, global experts, and say something different and something new. I'm going to try to cover things that haven't been covered before, but willy-nilly, there will be things that are repetitive. The first real issue is, are we talking about partnerships? Are we talking about transitions? Are we talking about what is a circular economy? And I think the title of this session is actually covering all three, and I'm going to try and do that. Despite the fact that others have so magnificently covered the terrain, I'd like to say that, you know, circular economy has become a buzzword, a catchword in recent years. But in some ways, as Suzanne was saying, it has been around a long time. I remember 30 years ago with B.O. Schmidt-Blake from Wuppertal Institute, Ernst von Weizsäcker when he was there and later he was in the UN. We talked about factor 10 and factor 5 futures for material use in a very solid, reasoned way, demonstrating that in fact, it wasn't energy and it wasn't the issues of pollution as much as the massive use of mineral and other material resources, which was causing many of the other problems that we have to deal with these days. Traditionally, our parents, our grandparents lived in a circular economy. Circular economy is what all of history is about, except for the last 200 odd years. And even there, it's only in the last few decades that it has become a real issue that we have to deal with. as a conversion from the way we used to be to the way we should be. But I do want to say that there are people living in a circular economy today, some 1/3 to 1/2 of the people on the planet, living in a circular economy, which is kind of a vicious circular economy, a vicious cycle of what you might call a poverty trap, living in subsistence levels of take, make, and dispose and waste, but in a very different kind of way, extraction of very meager resources, wood and twigs and soils and water, leading to soil destruction, low incomes, leading to more babies, larger families, more deprivation, and it's actually a poverty trap that is really a vicious cycle. So when we talk about circular economy, there are other kinds of circular economies from which we have to emerge in order to get into the virtuous circular economy of the kind that Marcus Grover was talking about. And a sustainable future depends on how fast we get out of that vicious cycle one. And frankly, that means more and faster and more scaled up delivery of development outcomes for very poor people before we can reach this. And one of those outcomes will be a demographic transition where hopefully the number of people on the planet will have stabilized and maybe even come down, because until then, it doesn't matter how cyclic your economy is if there are more and more people demanding more and more things. So in order to get to a transition to get there, we need certain kinds of technologies, we need a certain kind of economic system, we need to create new kinds of livelihoods and meet basic needs. We just talked about food and shelter and clothing, for example. And also, we have to have different kinds of governance. Governance that puts, in a sense, some value to human life, to putting the last first, to taking care of the people who got left behind, which is, of course, what the SDGs are trying to do. On technology, I would like to say that we don't have enough emphasis on what we might call frugal technology, resource-conserving technology, a technology that enables us to decouple our material and environmental impacts from GDP and economic growth. And above all, I think we need totally new disruptive kind of technologies, which come out of biomimicry, out of learning from nature and being inspired by nature. Nature is the ultimate circular economy. There's no such thing as waste in nature. The waste of one kingdom gets absorbed as food for another kingdom. And we now need to learn from the ecosystem flows how our mechanical and physical economies have to work. So there's going to have to be a kind of a partnership between science, engineering, on the one hand, markets and policymakers on the other. And I think we're not getting there fast enough. Adriana Marina talked a lot about the issues of how to create better livelihoods and meet basic needs, particularly in the third world and in developing countries. And I think that's got to be put on the top of our agenda when we talk about about circular economies. Now, partnerships. Partnerships in the next 2 minutes that I have available to me are about bringing together the public, the private, and the people, the civil society as a part of that equation. Today, in many, many countries, in countries where more than half the people live, civil society is really actually not persona non grata. Civil society has been basically marginalized and put on a back burner by the establishment and by the forces that deploy the decisions and economies in every society. In my own country and in many other countries, many of them represented here, we do not have enough reliance on building a good, solid public and private partnership together with the people. And if you don't recognize the importance of civil society, the NGOs, the voluntary sector, as being essential in ensuring that the roles, the responsibilities, the deliveries of the market as well as of the public sphere, which Frick Van Eyck was talking a lot about, don't matter. I mean, until we recognize the important role of civil society as a check and balance for doing the right kinds of things, for ensuring that human and natural values are kept. They're very important. And finally, I'd like really to make a case that in the long run, let's say in 20, 30, 40 years from now, the only businesses that will be allowed, will be given a social license, will be social enterprises. Businesses who adopt as their business objectives doing good for the planet, doing good for people. And that's not so at the moment. So the partnerships today needed in order to make up for the fact that we don't have many solid social enterprises is the partnership between people's organizations, civil society, and businesses, blessed hopefully by government, to be able to do these things. And simplistic notions of corporate social responsibility are not going to be enough. That's not really going to take us where we need to go. We have to make sure that businesses themselves are doing what is socially desirable. So I would say that, these three things that the organizers of the summit chose, partnerships, transitions, and circular economy, are three of the most important things on our plate. And having brought them all three together here, it seems to me we have an opportunity to really think through how to transform the future for the good of everyone, not just for a few. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Khosla. I think very good. I think that nature is ultimate for circular economy could be used as one of the key words when we attack circular economy. I think very well put up. So speakers, thank you very much. I think we don't have much time for questions, though some of them are interesting, especially the one in which says, can you mention a couple of challenges that you see developing countries facing in a transition to circular economy? In what ways can partnerships overcome these? So what I would suggest, sir, is I would ask the CII Secretariat to circulate these questions and you could send us the answers by mail, which we will give to all the participants. So I once again thank Dr. Sousa, Mr. Marcus, Mr. Luca Maini, Mr. Freak, Ms. Adriana, Dr. Gunjan Bhardwaj, and Dr. Khosla for their very, very informative address to the participants. So thank you, CII Secretariat, I think very well for having given this opportunity, and thank all of you for this. I would now request all the panelists to just switch on their camera, maybe, and go to the gallery view, and we will take a screenshot before we close. So I think Seema, you're also online, or maybe the CII internal can take this screenshot, please.
Sure, sir. We will take it right away.
Please. I don't know where is Seema. I don't know if she's my drops. Once it's over, you tell me. Done? Swati?
Yes, sir. We are just taking it. Just a second. Yes, we have taken it now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you once again, and thank you. And I think we'll all work towards the circular economy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.